Hello, this is Corey. Before we go into today's podcast, I want to share with you that we are going to run the Confident and Consistent Leader Challenge again. We will launch it on November 1st. This will be the third time that we have ran it this year because, quite honestly, it's been successful. It is working and getting movement in people's lives. We ran it in the month of June, and then we ran it with a different group of leaders in the month of September, and people are having impact. One individual said he was thoroughly impressed with the content and structure and wouldn't change anything. Another leader said that the challenge has been fantastic and has been a true lifeline as they were shipwrecked on an island. So I don't know where you are coming at right now and what you're doing to end this year, but this challenge will help you end the year well and start off 2022 on strong footing. The challenge is in 4 different parts. First part is on perspective. What is your current reality? The second part is about potential. Where do you want to go at work, at home? The third week will be about priorities, helping you prioritize what you actually want to go after. And then the fourth week is about a path forward. It's putting things in place to help you go. The challenge consists of daily emails as well as videos to teach the content you watch on your own time, as well as live group coaching calls each week. So this challenge is working, and maybe now is your time to sign up and participate. Go to CoreyMCarlson.com/leadership to take advantage of the early bird pricing before it goes up. We launch this next challenge on November 1st. Look forward to seeing you in the program. Thank you. Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey. Today's episode with Nathan is a great one. It is one of the longest podcasts I've done in a long time, if not ever. And really the reason why is during the conversation, I couldn't think of a time to stop it or start to wind it down because it was just so good. And then when I re-listened to the overall podcasting about what to have the editors take out, I couldn't think of anything then either because it all was valuable. I think you will see that as well. Nathan is very open, wise, and vulnerable. He talks about some regrets he has from a parenting standpoint that he wish he would have done better, that we can learn from, so we don't make some of those same mistakes. He made some mistakes in his marriage that he's very open and transparent about that also can help all of us. He talks about the difference between a manager and a individual contributor and just a lot of different topics. Very, very helpful. I think you will get a lot out of it. And on to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey Carlson. You're listening to the Win at Home First podcast. Today, I'm joined by Nathan Sheets, who is CEO, owner of Nature Nate's Honey, a household brand that many of you have probably heard of. And he's just a very family-oriented man, a very faith-forward man from the standpoint of Nature Nate's. Jesus and God are on the website. He also was one of the instrumental people in I Am Second, which we'll end up talking about some, I'm sure, on this podcast. So just an incredible faith-forward leader, and want to invite him on the podcast to help all of us win at work and win at home. So Nathan, thank you for joining the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Corey. It's awesome. Looking forward to it.
Nathan, what is that key trait to win at both home and work?
Oh, man. I would just say humility, especially even more at home than at work. Where, as we all know, parenting can be the most humbling job in the world. I think it's funny. I was telling someone the other day that one of the hard things about CEOs and owners and things like that to be effective at home is at work we get to operate in our sweet spots, and I get to work in my strengths. But when I come home, I'm working in my weaknesses most of the time. And I don't have the ability to do what I do at work. And that's surround myself with people that are really good at doing the things I'm not good at doing. And so at home, it's all hands on deck. You have to do everything. And so trying to find that balance is important. That's why it's such a humbling exercise.
What does home being your weakness look like?
my wife and I, when we first got married, we had a pre-marriage counselor, and Dennis said, y'all's biggest challenge is you're too much alike. So, and I think that, at the end of the day, she is very gregarious, outgoing, but the way that plays out, if we're both big picture people, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, who's doing the work? So it's like family vacations. They don't get planned until like the week before we're supposed to go, and and all those other areas. But I am very grateful that she is far more intentional, far more self-disciplined with my ADD entrepreneurial personality and being a big picture, person. I'm great in burst, but in the marathon, that's where I like start to get weighed down a little bit. So, in parenting, it's about intentionality, consistency, creating time, depending on what currency is in each individual person's love bank or what's needed, makes you need to figure out how to make those deposits. And if you're not best at creating that currency, then it becomes a challenge, And so for kids that like to do things that I like to do, hunt and fish and those other types of things, and it's really easy. But for the ones that don't, it becomes more challenging. And so, it's trying to be intentional and consistent is probably the areas where I struggle the most.
You have 4 kids, range from 14 to 21. Did you do a good job of dates and intentionality with them?
Man, that's one thing I regret, especially on my daughter, that I did it very sporadically. And I wish hindsight, she just turned 18 and she feels overlooked. And, we're a very boy-centric house. Those are some levels of regrets that I have. And then I have another, awesome son who I've got 2 boys that love to hunt and fish. And, they're like somewhat, little replicas of me, and then 2 that aren't. And the area that I'm not good at was investing into the other 2. But I took my 20-year-old son. We went to Paris last week. He really loves fashion and wants to go to fashion school. And he, was like, I'd love to go to fashion school in Paris. I was like, all right, well, let's go. So we, loaded up and went over and went and visited fashion schools and then did, stuff. And I've taken him to both of the other 2, New York on multiple trips, and, go to jazz clubs and go to Broadway and, do things that they enjoy doing. It just makes me have to really put forth an effort to help me figure out what they like to do, and then help fan those flames as they start to try to figure out even what they want to do in life.
You come across as a man with a lot of intentionality. So even as you admit, hey, I made some regrets, so thank you for that vulnerability, that you won't stay there. Like, it's going to be a pivot now of, all right, I've got an 18, 14-year-old. I could have invested a little bit more time, but from here on out, it's going to look different.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say it with that kind of confidence to say, yeah, you're right, Corey, burn the ships or burn the lifeboats. There's no going back. But,
right.
A dog goes back to his vomit, unfortunately. And, and what I don't want to do is, I think also, I'm turned 50, I'll be 52 in November. And I really think kind of that age transition starts to make you very much more retrospective, in life in terms of what's valuable and important. I think in your 40s, I always say you're kind of in this weird no man's land in your 40s. You're not the young guy that other guys want to pour into, but you're not the wise sage that people are looking for insight from. And so when I turned 50, I'm like, okay, these are the things that are really important. And so from that perspective, I think I'm able to slow down a little bit, do find things that are going to last and invest into those. And then I would just say from a professional perspective, I've got more time, to be able to spend with them and want to spend with them. And so I think COVID has been a stellar opportunity for those very things. For 18 months, we've just been doing stuff together and having fun and family games and, just sitting around talking and things like that. So it's been really beneficial for us.
Yeah, there are definitely good things that came out of COVID for sure. You mentioned that verse out of 2 Peter 2 about a dog returns to his vomit, which obviously is a very gross verse, but yet we all can relate. Another verse that is very similar to that is that idea of new wine into old wineskins, where when you pour the new wine in the old wineskin, it will expand, and it actually can expand, so it bursts. And I see a lot of leaders where we'll come out of this COVID in this time of family dinners and playing board games and all these awesome things we all did. And so what are you doing to make sure that obviously we can't play board games every night. We can't do these things every night because we are getting back to work for sure. But what are you doing so you don't, that old wineskin or dog return to his vomit? What are you looking to do in your family to make sure, hey, there's some of these predictable patterns. There's some of these rhythms we're keeping. I mean, the Sheets family is going to look different post-COVID than it did pre-COVID.
Yeah, I think one of my challenges I've had in times past, for years and years and years, I traveled a lot, especially when the kids were younger. And for me, I almost became addicted to travel because you do what you want, when you want, you eat where you want, you watch what you want, you go where, it's just on your own timetable. And then you come home and, the kids are too loud and this and that. And you're like, well, I'll just get back on the road. And this was actually pre-COVID. I'd say about 4 years ago, I just made the decision, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it took a while to kind of break it and find the value in not being annoyed by, kids and them disrupting what I want to do, quote unquote, what I want to do. And so I think that was really beneficial. So that is the foundation. And then now you overlay the things that we're going to make sure that we keep doing. I think, going that next level beyond the travel is then, okay, so let's make memories as a family, in terms of doing things, going places, and really being intentional then to walk with my own kids and helping them be successful. And especially with them now starting to become adults, help them discover the Ephesians 2:10, the good works that God created in advance that they should walk in, and help them understand the way in which God created them and fan those flames. And I always, I've got my kids that talk different times, especially my oldest, about wanting to come and work at Nature Nate's. And he looks like me, talks like me, people look at him and go, man, that's you, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. But I've just told Hudson, hey, I don't want you to be Nature Nate. And I want you to be Nature Hudson. You figure out what it is, and I'll come help you be successful and serve you. And so, whether it's Hudson or any of the others, that's what I want to do. And so those are the things that are the non-negotiables of just being intentional about, helping them become successful in whatever it is that God's created them to do.
That's so good. As a father, my kids are younger than yours. How were you helping to encourage how God's wired them? How were you helping them kind of discover that so they just don't go the way of the majority, the way of the masses?
I mean, we've done some of the, typical kind of personality test things, but I would say, it really comes out of spending time with them and seeing it and then, pointing it out. And it's super easy to be critical. Oh, do this, or you should do this, or don't do that. It's another thing to be purposeful and trying to build them up and encourage them and, pointing out the things that they're good at doing, and then maybe trying to connect that into what could that mean from a career standpoint, in life. And a friend of mine used to ask, if you had unlimited time, unlimited money, and a divine guarantee for success, what would you do with your life? And I think that as a, teenage kid going into college, that's a pretty realistic way to look at life, because you're not really tied down by anything at that time. And since God created you for good works, then you are going to be successful, whatever it is, if you commit your ways to the Lord, and he will direct your paths. And recognize that everything you do, you're just a ministry guy in a businessman or businesswoman's clothing, and you're out there to make a difference for the kingdom.
Very good. It is so wild how it's easy to throw critique at our kids versus encouragement. Like, it takes intentionality and focus. There'll be times I go out to coffee or do a date with one of my kids, and I'll have to bite my tongue so I don't turn into coach mode and share all these things with them of all this great wisdom I've learned. But instead, just sit there. And that's the best. That's when they actually come back and tell mom they had such a good time with me. Usually if I'm coaching them, I don't get I had such a fun time having donuts with dad today.
I'll get I'm not one of your employees comment sometimes.
Yep. It sounds like we're all the same. And it sounds like you were in my house and in my quiet time this morning saying the kids are too loud. I got in trouble this weekend from my wife saying that I was, getting too strict on their being loud. And
oh, yes.
Quiet time, I was asking for patience and grace for some of the volume, because after a busy day, you need peace and quiet. Nathan, a part of my story is that there was a moment where I've kind of felt this audible, or where God's saying, you need to hand over your story for a greater story. This idea that my way wasn't working anymore and I needed to hand it over to God and follow his lead. As I say that, was there a moment in your life where you felt that Nathan's way no longer was working and you needed to do something different in the way you're leading your family or your career?
I was in full-time ministry vocationally, and, doing I Am Second. And I've really felt like the Lord was prompting me to leave I Am Second back in 2009 and go do something else, not knowing what that meant. But my response, and that wasn't like an audible, hearing from the Lord, but it was a definite prompting. But I think my emotional response was, well, God, how can you do that without me? I'm the I Am Second guy. Ultimately, long story short, just wound up on me leaving full-time ministry just due to infidelity, revealing that to my wife, and just all the challenges of working on my marriage and even my own just walk with the Lord, and figuring out what to do from a career standpoint. And by only God's grace, we had this little tiny honey company that had come out of me buying a beehive as a hobby right after Patty and I got married in 96. So really just trying to figure out, God, what do you want me to do for work? And how do I provide for my family? And the honey company couldn't do it by itself. And so Patty and I would sit on the front porch many of those mornings and pray and read scripture and cry and talk. And so as we were trying to figure out what to do for work, then, I told her that if we had another $100,000 a year in revenue from Nature Nate's or North Dallas Honey, that it could provide for our family. And so we just said, hey, let's just pray and ask the Lord to give us another $100,000 a year in income. And then we could do it full time. And so while we were having that conversation, a friend of ours called us and she shared that God had given her a vision that night, and that John the Baptist had provided with locusts and honey, and he was going to provide for us with honey. And we were like, okay, thank you. And, we hung up and went back to reading Psalms 81. And in the last verse of Psalms 81, I believe it says, and I will feed you with the finest of wheat and honey from this rock. We're like, okay, Lord, our ears are listening. So about a week later, Patty told me to go by a Walmart down in Plano and see if they would take her honey. And I said, babe, I've tried the Walmart thing before, She said, go over there. And so I went over and met a woman who told me about a local vendor program and said, if I brought this local vendor form back in with the managers there, that if he signs it, they can bring me in that local Walmart. But she also gave me the buyer's phone number in Bentonville. So I went home and started filling out all the paperwork. And about a week later, I get a call and she says, hey, this is Janet Hane from Walmart. You want to be in Walmart? And so long story short, we wound up getting into Walmart, and very first purchase order from Walmart was for $107,000 exactly. So we were praying for $100,000 in a year, which God did in one order with a number 7 as an exclamation of what I think he was just saying, regardless of your own sinfulness and pridefulness and everything else, I am faithful and I won't abandon you. And I'm still walking with you, And so it was like just an affirmation that what I did for work mattered to the Lord, and that he, and again, in spite of myself, was going to allow me to continue to be involved, with his kingdom. Since that time, a lot of investment of time and energy and counseling and work. But it's been awesome, to see how the Lord has, really restored. Scripture says that the Lord restores what the locusts have destroyed. And so to watch him do that, and to watch him bring our marriage and my relationship with my kids, who I had full disclosure with all of them, which was really painful in itself and caused a lot of just challenges. But to look at relationally where we are today, I wish we could have gotten here some other way, but unfortunately, I don't know if we could have. And that's what the Lord used to create who we are today.
Thanks for sharing all that. What happened October 30th, 2017?
It was just a point of just final surrender. And I was getting ready we've had the neighborhood Halloween party at our house. We bought our home in 2010, and at closing, which was in the end of October, the people we were buying it from said, "Oh, by the way, the annual Halloween party is at the house. You mind if we have it there next week?" And we're like, "Sure." So it's been our house for almost 30 years. So I was mowing the lawn that night, and I had been drinking that day, and it just contemplating kind of still where I was in life and just the challenges, and that had not seen the transformation which I had desired. And so I was listening to worship music, mowing my lawn, kind of in the dark. And I just finally stood up and, put my hands up, and literally I just said, "God, you got to save me." And it wasn't salvifically. It was, save me from the path of destruction that I know I'm headed down. If I continue to go down this road, I'm going to be, it's going to be bad for everybody. And, so just out of that, calling out, crying out to the Lord, that he, just in a short order period of time, just brought Patty and I to this place, brought me to a place of desperate desire for spiritual renewal and restoration, and a desire to change, and just not being okay with where I was.
And so what's it look like since 2017?
Well, I quit drinking, which seemed to be at the source of a lot of my numbingness and boredom, and, just so, that's one aspect. Spent a lot of time in counseling and therapy and understanding. And I say this without giving it any excuse, giving my actions or the decisions that I made any excuse, but recognizing, sexual abuse at age 5 and 10, and exposure to pornography at that time, and understanding the role that played, in me being in this triggering loop of being plagued by, pornography and sexual sins. And Patty and I spending a tremendous amount of time, full disclosure to where there was nothing hidden in my life from her. And then using that as the way to be able to build the wall back up, and I think of Nehemiah, and Nehemiah went to him and, implored everybody to build the wall that's up in front of their house, and that was the best way to keep their family safe, and the greatest way for Nehemiah to get the whole wall complete. And so when I think about our family, it was really, Patty and I recognizing the wall had to be leveled in order to be built back up, to create the security and the foundation of which we wanted our family to be built upon. And the result of that is I, talk with my kids about my failures and also tell them, that every failure is closer to success. And from a business standpoint, I constantly say, if you're not failing enough, you're not trying enough to do stuff. And every failure is one step closer to success. And no one learns from success. They always learn from failure. And so, but now you go apply your personal life to that, and it's a painful analysis, but I've used that, to help walk with my kids and using myself as a real life example of, hey, these are the things that you can't let go unchecked in your life. And we're not going to just blush over things. We're going to deal with things, and we're going to do the hard work, and we're going to talk about things. We're going to live transparently and authentically. And then we're going to come alongside of each other and hold each other's arms up to struggle through life well. And so in some sense, I just weep and gnash my teeth looking at all the past, but I'm also being entrepreneurial and growth focused. I'm a very forward looking person. And so I'm going to use it and allow the Lord to use it to make an impact for the kingdom. And I've been transparent about it in times past, and so for the Lord to take it and do a Romans 8:28 and maybe even use it as a way to make a difference in other people's lives and they avoid it, then from an eternal perspective, it's worth it.
Thank you for sharing the story. I did not know all those pieces. Before it gets to eternal, I mean, you, by coming clean of your affair, I mean, you've stopped generational sin. And having these open conversation with your kids, that you have stopped it from the trickle effect that porn and other things can have on so many individuals that they don't even know about. Being involved in just different conversations around campfires can get very deep, or was involved in a men's ministry where we go out to Montana, but all these different things that take place, it's amazing how much like porn can cause a problem to when they saw it when they were less than 10, and now they're 40 or 50 and it still haunts them. And I'm encouraging a lot of my friends and clients, if they have, kids less than 10 who touch social media, now's the time to have a conversation. And a lot of people have a pushback of, oh, way too early. I'm like, no, it's not.
No.
It's amazing what YouTube will put in on the side columns of ads. And so we've had this conversation in my house. Part of my story, Nathan, where that all even came from, of your story, Hand Over Your Greater Story. Unfortunately for me, I also had infidelity, and that was what was me kind of handing over, my wrong ways for the greater good. But we too in our house have had these conversations. We've had these deep conversations of, the introduction to my book is sharing of that story. And so all three of my kids know it. They know what happened. And not that I like talking about it, but same thing for you. I think the benefit of telling our kids is some of our kids are wired just like us. So they're going to have the same weaknesses. My oldest, Kylie, is the Enneagram 3. She's an achiever. She goes for people for approval. Well, if I wasn't to tell her of my affair and me going to people for approval, and me going to other people to get my questions answered about who I am and am I a man, she could fall in that same trap. So if I can tell her to guard herself, to understand that she is already approved, she's coming from a position of approval as a daughter of God, as opposed to having to go to others for approval, hopefully I too have stopped another affair from ever happening in my family.
That's awesome. Scripture says that the sins of the father pass along to the fourth and fifth generation. And as I've thought about that, I don't know if there's a spiritual stronghold of adultery. There could be, or a spiritual stronghold of lust. But when I look at that, the emotional holes that we all have in our heart is what we wind up trying to fill them with, fill in the blank. And so I think, if you're exposed in a period of time where there's some trauma that happens in your life and you have this emotional need, then you fill it with food, or you fill it with pornography, or you fill it with, money, or fill in the blank. And so as you are re-traumatized throughout life or re-triggered through some scenario or circumstance, and then you wind up turning towards that thing that, I have a belief that the sins of a father of the past are less about how it plays out in our life and more about the emotional relational damage that I have from my father and my father has from his father. And it creates those emotional, holes and needs and trauma that get filled. And so with your infidelity, with my infidelity, and then our intentionality of using it as a way to go talk about it and trying to look at those holes that even our own kids have.
I definitely, agree with that piece. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I want to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And the last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. One thing I thought was interesting, going a little bit back to part of your story, is the irony of I am second where you worked, but yet having the phrase you said, how can you do it without me, God? Like,
Yes. Quite ironic, right?
yeah, it is. But you were doing ministry and the whole message was I am second, you forgot the message. And I just going back to that, how have you now, as you are fast forward to now to Nature Nate's, it's your name. It's your brand. I know you've got 80 employees or maybe even more now, but you've got a team. But how do you, because I know a lot of listeners, it's this tension between building a business, their own brand. And so now it's a lot of personal brand. It's just something I can battle with now too, is building a coaching practice. But yet knowing we are second. And reality is God can do it without us, but he wants us. And so for you, Nathan, what does that look like in your life from your vulnerability of the I am second comment to now fast forward to Nature Nate's?
One, I think recognizing how temporary everything is and who truly owns it. I did, I started to fall into the idea that I was the most important person, inside of I am second, which to your point, was completely distorted. Now, at Nature Nate's, I think that I as the leader, I try to maintain a inverted triangle, to where I'm at the bottom and serving everyone else all the way up to the top, and being authentic and transparent with who I am. I've told, people on my leadership team know exactly where I have been and my struggles. And so I kind of wear it on my sleeve to just maintain that transparency and invite people to speak in if they see inconsistencies in my life.
What are you hearing from God right now, Nathan?
At church yesterday, we had actually a Jewish Messianic rabbi come in and talking about Sabbath and Shabbat. And he was just talking about how it's about, when God created creation, he created time and space. And, and so in our own lives, the Sabbath is about keeping time and space, creating time and space for the purpose of relationship and for worshiping the Lord. And a big portion of Shabbat, which is the Friday evening meal leading into the Sabbath, a big portion of that is blessing everybody at the table. And so there's a blessing on the children, there's a blessing on the women, there's a blessing on the men. And so use that time to speak a blessing over your children. And what an amazing difference that will be in their life if they grow up with their parents speaking blessings over them every single week. If you did Shabbat, as part of your family tradition. And so I think what I'm really wanting the Lord to do is to allow me to create more time and space. I think I have found value in the past in being busy. How are you? Oh man, I'm busy. I think there's tremendous value in say, how are you? Man, I'm great. Now I have a lot going on. What can I do for you? And so that's what I'm really, I'm not looking to slow down at all, but I'm looking to make investments in things that last. And that's, first and foremost, my family and friends.
Man, what would happen if we answered that question? What could I do for you? If someone asked, it's almost like a test. We should both go do that and see what happens. See if we got any stories, because that would be something wild.
But you got to be willing to do it. I had a friend.
I'm like, I'll get back with you later. And you made the comment about blessing our kids, and heck, we even bless our spouses to do a dinner like that. I mean, man, you talk about armoring up. I mean, as Paul, talks about, if your kids and in your spouse, and it'd get reciprocated, occasionally, but if the family individually and collectively was getting armored up to go out really in the world of what's happening with the different tensions that are out there, if we could help armor up our families to go out, man, that'd be pretty impressive.
Steve Farrar, the guy who wrote Point Man and, a lot of Christian books, he wrote this book that I read called King Me. And Steve explained that the purpose of the king wasn't to rule the land. Yeah, you had to rule the land. But the purpose of the king was to raise the next king. And so I think as business guys, I get caught up in ruling my kingdom versus focusing on the king that's coming in behind me. And I'm already fulfilling what I'm supposed to do, which is secondary and, far less important than making sure the next guy is our children, that they're queued up and ready, to be the king. And again, I think it's part of being 50 now and just being a little bit more retrospective and recognizing how temporary everything is. And, watching my own parents, my dad died about 12 years ago. My mom's in poor health, and we have lots of friends, whose parents are passing and things like that. And I'm starting to really see just the multi-generational need of influence, especially when everything in the world is pulling those kids beyond us or below us, pulling them away from the kingdom. Everything in society and culture are pulling them away from God and devaluing family and everything. And so it's so critical, that I stop focusing on trying to be the king and focus on trying to raise the king.
I love that example. You give a book, and that's a faith-based book. I also like when there's a secular book that's speaking some of the same things, and that book, Founder's Dilemma, where the question is, do you want to be king or do you want to be rich? And obviously it's about money there. But the rich thing is, if you're king, you're making all the decisions, you're not delegating, you're not equipping, you're not empowering, because it's all about you. But to get rich, which even though we aren't trying to drive the idea of financial capital, it's all about developing others and releasing control and helping grow the team. And in the end, yeah, you may in fact get rich. And in the end, you will find that replacement, that number two.
Yeah. A friend of mine was sharing with me about, being the difference between being a manager and an individual contributor. And I think historically, and even in my second days, I was a great individual contributor. I thought I was smarter, work harder, work longer. But I'm at this place now to where my greatest opportunity to be successful as a business owner is to serve the staff and the leadership team to help them be successful as a CEO. And as I am more successful as a CEO, serving them to be successful and accomplishing the corporate goals, then that is the greatest impact for me as the owner to gain, the greatest wealth from my company. So, I mean, that's, I see that playing out, what you just shared, even in our own business and life. all the time.
And if we could do that at home and at work, always helping those, below us or reporting to us to be successful, in the end, we'll get what we selfishly kind of want in the beginning. It's not a give to get, but it's just how it works out.
It goes back to humility and humbleness, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's all about me, then I'm destined for a repeat of 2010 and 2017.
Yeah.
And we burned those life boats. So
we burnt those ships, not going back. I hear you. Nathan, I enjoyed this tremendously and look forward to future conversations and staying in touch. Nathan, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? And for sure, they've got to buy your honey, Nature Nate Honey.
You can text me on my cell phone, 214-642-9367. And emails get lost, but you can email me at nathan.sheets@naturenates.com.
Awesome. Nathan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at corymcarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.